Ladies and gentlemen, over the weekend, I had the opportunity to sit down and interview Jeff Lenberg. In a moment here, you'll get to see that interview. CNN put out a hit piece on him that was slander, defamatory, inaccurate, riddled with accusations that never should have been risen, and simply this idea that these folks are committing a crime while ignoring potentially the same exact crime being committed by them, if it is in fact a crime. So I want you to take the time and watch this interview. It is rather long. It's about 2 hours and 30 minutes. And I can promise you the entire interview is information. A lot of stuff you may not know. An insider look, if you will. Jeff Lenberg doesn't have a biography online that's readily accessible, but we're going to read an affidavit from his former employer. He's one of Jeff Lenberg's bosses. And you're going to see the affidavit from this man, a colonel in the Air Force, retired, an astronaut, a man who continues to give his service to the country, working on nuclear fuel programs in the space station, tons of stuff. Just listen to the affidavit of this guy's accreditations. And most importantly, look at what he says about Jeff Lenberg. That's the man that they want to hang out to dry. A man who has given so much to this country. Jeff doesn't talk about this much during the interview. He doesn't talk about it at all during the interview. But Jeff's real passion is bringing electricity and quality schools and quality jobs to children in Africa. You see these photos here are from Uganda, where Jeff was helping build a school and installing solar panels and getting the network all set up for them. This is a man who is giving his life to service and to God. And now he's being attacked because they don't want something to come out. I don't know what the reason for it is. I really don't. But watch this interview, and I hope you guys appreciate this. God bless. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Today is September 24th, 2022, and this is a special Saturday episode. We've got a lot to cover in this episode here. I am going to be joined by a very special guest. A lot of you guys may have seen my episode earlier on in the week where we talked about this Anderson Cooper CNN hit piece. The mainstream Mockingbird media has been relentless over the last few weeks. Between Coffee County, obviously Maricopa County, we've seen a lot of rumblings in Pennsylvania, and now Michigan is back in the limelight, so to say, with this special prosecutor that's been brought forth against Matt DePerno and some of the other individuals that were in this investigation. So without further ado, I want to bring on one of the investigators that is named in this CNN hit piece. Let me bring in Mr. Jeff Lenberg. Mr. Lenberg, how are you doing today, sir?
I am doing well. Thank you.
All right. So before we actually go and roll into this, I know that you had wanted to lead us in a prayer, as you typically do when you come on to one of these shows. And I think that's a very good idea. We're up against some incredibly evil spirits, I believe, right now. And if you'd like to lead us in a prayer, go ahead, sir.
Love to do that. Thank you. This is from Psalm 19:14, if anybody's interested. So, Lord God, we ask today that the words of our mouth and the meditations of our hearts might be acceptable and pleasing in your sight, Lord. We know that you are a God of truth. And Lord, I pray today that all that is spoken is truth, that you would guide the conversation, that no falsehoods would be communicated, but only truth. And so, Lord, we commit this time to you. We ask for you to help us to do that, and we ask it in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you for that, sir. And there was a hit piece put out by Anderson Cooper. I caught this just by chance. It wasn't really advertised or anything, and I was just watching the other night on Thursday night, I believe it was. Thursday night, I was watching Anderson Cooper, and they were talking about Trump and the Mar-a-Lago and all that stuff. And the next segment that they went into, I was blown away to see Matt DePerno's face pop up right away, because I've spoken with Matt DePerno numerous times over the past 2 years. He's been on my program many, many times, mainly before he announced his run as Attorney General. And I followed the case up there very closely. I remember when you did the vote flip, so to speak, on OANN with Mr. DePerno. And I think Matt actually came on my program after that event to talk a little bit more about it. So without any further ado, I want to jump in and watch go through this segment real quick. It's only about 5 minutes. We're going to watch it first so that we both have an idea of what's going on, as well as the audience, so that they understand what we're up against in this. So
this guy smiling for the pictures is running to be the top law enforcement official in the state of Michigan. So why is he also running from us?
Mr. DePerno, we'd like to give you every opportunity to answer some questions.
Matt DePerno, the Republican candidate for Michigan's Attorney General, is also under criminal investigation for a conspiracy to unlawfully obtain access to voting machines, though he hasn't been charged. He is also one of the main sources of the biggest lie surrounding the 2020 election, a debunked tale that Dominion voting tabulators changed votes from Trump to Biden. His campaign manager initially told CNN DePerno would do an interview. That didn't happen.
No. Mr. DePerno, can we just have a few minutes of your time? We've been trying to ask you a question for like a month and a half. What were you trying to do with those tabulators? What were you trying to prove?
DePerno and 8 others tried to prove there was fraud in the 2020 election. According to the current state attorney general, they illegally seized voting machines and broke into the tabulators and performed tests on the equipment.
We've been able to show through our case how the machines can actually manipulate votes.
It is simply nonsense. At one point, DePerno even posted a video of one of his so-called experts breaking into an actual voting machine, unintentionally proving how difficult it would be to manipulate votes. Every machine would have to be physically breached, which is a crime.
What needs to happen here is database modification commands.
Jocelyn Benson is Michigan's Secretary of State.
That to me seems like a crime on video.
Sure does to me as well. Yeah. And as the state's chief election officer, my job is to report those potential crimes, which I did, and also ensure that any machines that were tampered with are decommissioned and replaced.
CNN has learned DePerno's so-called private investigation may have gone beyond tabulators and led to attempts to open sealed paper ballots. In an email to an attorney in March 2021, the clerk of Berry County, Michigan, says DePerno told her she would need to collect the ballots which are under seal, and that DePerno said they will be opening the ballot bags and resealing them. The clerk refused. Michigan's results were not only certified, local audits and a state Senate report led by Republicans found no evidence of widespread or systematic fraud.
The report is adopted.
What's so alarming is that DePerno's scheme in Michigan is linked to others just like it across the country. Authorities in multiple states are investigating voting machine breaches. In a Colorado case, 2 men who worked with DePerno were named on a warrant in a federal investigation for identity theft and intentional damage to a protected computer. Also named Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy.
Just demand an audit.
Who's been one of the most vocal spreaders of lies about voting machines. And in Georgia, this surveillance video shows DePerno's IT expert, remember the guy from that video, in a restricted area of an elections office where voting machines were breached. And another one of DePerno's IT experts claims in a court case he forensically examined Dominion Democracy Suite voting systems in Arizona, Michigan, Colorado, and Georgia. Secretary of State Benson says her state gave information to the Department of Justice.
I think we've seen on every level a lot of evidence that this is a nationally coordinated effort, whether it's to try to gain access to our voting machines, whether it is trying to run candidates who are spouting misinformation to become chief election officers.
In Michigan, not only is DePerno running for Attorney General, the Republican nominees for governor, lieutenant governor, and secretary of state all say they believe the meritless claim the 2020 election was fraudulent. Should they win, they would control upcoming elections. In fact, 27 states have an election denier running for a position that could influence elections.
We're in a very dangerous moment right now. If people who are running on a platform of election denial, telling their voters that they will in fact put their thumb on the scale to ensure that their candidates win, we could have a real problem with actual democracy in the United States.
Election system advisor David Becker says the danger is not just if candidates win, but also if they lose and refuse to accept the results.
Imagine we have dozens of January 6ths all over the country at different places and times.
Which is why the upcoming midterms are so consequential. In Michigan, voters will choose if election deniers will lead their state, including a potential attorney general under criminal investigation.
Are you worried you'll be indicted before the election, sir?
Andrew joins us now. Is it a possibility he's going to be charged before Election Day? What's the status of the investigation?
You know, it doesn't look like it. The special prosecutor who inherited this case has just ordered more investigative work to be done before he can make a decision on those charges.
All right, so Jeff, in that video, they throw all sorts of things around. I know there's a lot of air you want to clear up, but first, I think it's really important to establish they call you a quote unquote so-called expert at one point in there, and they also call the other individuals that you guys worked with in all of this quote unquote so-called experts. So I think it's a really good place to start with the biography, the bios of the individuals that were involved in this. Now, I know you want to kind of talk about some of the other individuals, and then I have something I want to read that is a testament to your background. So go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, they called us so-called experts, and they also insinuated that we're a team that was somehow put together by Trump to go across the country and, you know, in a unified way or with a plan to go, I don't know, do something that they think we're going to do, break into systems and steal the software so we can cheat in future elections, you know, some ridiculous stuff like that. I don't know what exactly they think we're going to do with this, but the point is that the so-called experts, which is intended to minimize the expertise of the team, is really a problem, because if they're investigative journalists putting this kind of stuff out, it's very easy to go online and to get very brief bios of these people that are listed. Their bios are out there. I'm the only one that's not really listed out there very well, but these other guys are listed out there, and they have incredible credentials. And so, you know, if we can take them up one at a time. Ben Cotton, by the way, it was a privilege to work with all of these guys. They're real professionals, each one of them. And so, but Ben is got his own company. He's been in this business for decades of doing forensic analysis. He's got a huge background with tons of credentials, and he's got his own company with something like 50 employees. Not long ago, they were bought out because they are, you know, that attractive a company. And so Ben is certainly one of the top people in his field. So, you know, to say so-called experts, he's a national expert in what he does, period. You move on to Jim Penrose. I mean, Jim Penrose was in the senior executive service with NSA. Okay, so he was a high-level manager. You go look at his bio and what he did. He went out and worked for Redacted after that, and he's an incredible expert in cyber warfare related types of stuff. And all you have to do is look at his bio. This is not a guy that's, you know, started last week. It's a guy that's for decades has been involved in this area, his area of expertise for many years with distinction. Okay, you go to Doug Logan. Doug Logan, you know, a decade's worth of experience at least. But Doug Logan, a great guy, and he's a real expert in what he does. And I saw that in the work that he did and his abilities in the whole you know, white hat area. He is an expert and has considerable experience, and so does his company, which is now defunct because of this whole thing. You know, they basically ran his company into the toilet because he was willing to do this kind of work. Now, what I want to say about this is that everybody that stepped into the space, generally, these people knew that this was going to be super controversial. They were likely to get canceled, and it was a very risky thing to do, and they stepped into it anyway, including myself. This is not something any one of us really wanted to do. It's something that we felt we had to do. Okay, each person. And I will also say many of these people, I think, were motivated by their own faith in God. I know that these people are each one believers in God, and that they had a compulsion that something needed to be done. And so they stepped into the space. So people say, oh, look, the same people are showing up in Georgia and showing up in Michigan and showing up in Maricopa, Arizona, and so on. And look, there's a conspiracy because it's the same guys going around everywhere. Well, you know what? There's very few people in the country that have the combined experience of this team of people. And there's even fewer that are willing to really look at the elections to try to determine what actually happened with all this anomalous behavior, to investigate it. So they're making it out that we're election deniers. We're not election deniers, we're election investigators. There's a lot of question in this country from many, many, many people how things seem to have gone so sideways in the last election. I mean, there are thousands of affidavits of unusual things occurring and technical things occurring that don't make sense. They need to be investigated. And to shut everybody down and block everybody out and say you're an election denier if you want to somehow make sure we have a secure election system is totally inappropriate. And you've heard me talk on a previous broadcast on Conservative Daily. You know, it would be great. I would prefer that the government do this. I would prefer that the EAC, I prefer that the certification companies. But to be honest, based on looking at their work and what they have missed, they're either incompetent or they're willfully negligent in doing the job. And that's why people like Ben Cotton, Jim Penrose, Doug Logan, and myself have stepped forward and put ourselves out there at risk because someone's got to do the job. And we each felt compelled that we had the expertise and the compulsion to go out and do this. So I just want to say thank you to those guys for being willing to do that and put themselves out there and at risk. There's a great little poster. I'll have to send you a copy of it. I don't know if you can read that. Can you see that and read that?
We all place ourselves in danger to a certain extent when we stand up, but we place our children and grandchildren in even greater danger when we don't. Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful to our posterity, right?
Exactly. And that's the feeling of this group of people is that, look, you know, some of us, we're old enough. Hey, we've been through most everything, you know, we're going to make it just fine. But our kids, I have 4 grandsons. Okay. I do not want a world where it's run by tyrannical rulers who control an election system potentially and select whoever they want. We know if we have an election system we can't trust, that's what will happen. And we will have a totalitarian state, which will not be a good thing for my grandkids, my kids, and my grandkids. And I don't want that for anybody else either. So that is a huge motivation for all of us.
Now, Mr. Lenberg, I want to talk about your qualifications as well, but there is something that I mentioned a long time ago. I actually did a segment for Matt DePerno several months back, probably a year about this point. And one of the things that we saw when all these investigations were going on, the Maricopa investigation, there was in Georgia as well, we saw these little micro audits. That's what I like to call them, micro audits, because they weren't anything near the scope of what Cyber Ninjas and Doug Logan did in Maricopa. But you would have companies like ProV&V and SLI Compliance, which are voting testing labs. They're voting systems testing labs. They're not auditors. They have no authority to audit. We don't even know. Their accreditation is highly questionable going into the 2020 election. However, one of the things that they always do is they have these companies come in before. They came in before in Maricopa. They came in before in Fulton County. In Maricopa, you see this 37,000 query bomb that destroyed all the logs, all the login information, you know, from the people that when they accessed the system during the election. So all that data was gone. And that log was done, you know, that query bomb was done in February of 2021, well after the election had taken place. And one of the things that I brought up was the scrutiny that is put on Doug Logan and Ben Cotton. But then you go and look at ProV&V, and they don't have near the qualifications to do forensic investigations into computer systems. There's an actual certification for it. I think it's is it the CISPA?
I'm not sure the exact one. I do know that Ben Cotton is absolutely, got all those qualifications to do that.
Correct. And that was my point, is that the whole time that they're trying to tell us that, Pro V&V are the authorized individuals, that was a flat out lie. There are no authorized auditors by the EAC, and they would definitely not be the company that tested it, because, as you've spoken to in processes a lot, that is a massive conflict of interest. Massive conflict of interest.
Yeah, it's absurd. The people that have the most to risk at something being found on this so-called certified system that was used in the election that someone thinks may have misbehaved is the certification company. They certified it.
Right.
They certified it was good to go. They told the state it was good to go. The state believed it. And then you turn around and you say the only people who can do the audit and come in and touch the equipment are those people that certified it.
It's insane.
Well, that's like saying, okay, you want to audit a bank, but the only people that can audit that bank are the CPAs that work at that bank.
That's the same analogy.
You would never do that. Okay.
It's the same exact analogy that I use. Literally the same exact analogy. You're being audited? Okay, only by my accountants.
So this is ridiculous. And yet, by the way, Maricopa wasn't the only one that did that. Brought in those two to audit before the Senate audit. They brought in and did their own audit. And as I have pointed out, and it's in the reports in Arizona, in the Cyber Ninja report, we discovered hundreds of thousands of corrupted ballot images. Okay, but they only happened after November 1st. So you go, wait a second, those machines scanned the images perfectly, stored them perfectly prior to November 1st. But starting November 1st, hundreds of thousands of ballots are corrupted. You can't read them. Well, I would like to know, was that the case on election night? Or did that happen at some time later, potentially when they came in to do their audit? Who knows when those ballot images got corrupted? It made it very hard to get a straightforward, complete audit because the images were messed up. Yep. And that is a problem, okay? It's just muddled the situation even further, because then we don't know who did what when at all. And of course, they say we go in and mess stuff up, and so you can't use the machines. Well, when we got the machines, they were messed up. Okay, they were definitely messed up when we got them. Someone had messed with them. The way they were, the files were on there. It wasn't just a failure of a hard drive or something. Yeah, that's a huge problem. I do want to point out, though, that in Michigan, the absurdity of all this is that you may remember there was a controversy in Antrim that Secretary of State was insisting that they use the machines for an upcoming election after the 2020 election, and their board was saying, no, we're not going to use them because we need to preserve them in the state they're in. And Secretary of State said, you must, get those machines cleaned up, and the company we recommend to do that, to come in to do that, is Pro V&V. The Secretary of State sent a letter to him saying, you must do this, and we think you should bring in Pro V&V to do it.
Shocker,
to clean these up and get them back into a usable state. Here's the question I have about Pro V&V, and some other time we can go into this in more detail, but they're opaque. I think I've mentioned this before. I did a search. It appeared that they had 3 employees. That's it. They certified, and they say they use a lot of subcontractors. Oh, okay. Qualified subcontractors. Give me a list.
Right.
I want to know exactly who those subcontractors are. What people were using it. They're talking about breaches that we breached the system in Georgia or breached the system in Michigan. All right. Well, wait a second. These companies, Pro V&V and SLI Compliance, they are handed the hardware, they are handed the source code, they're handed the compiled versions of it. They have absolutely everything. And we don't know anything about who they employ.
Nope.
We don't know anywhere about where that software goes, where that hardware goes. We have no idea. Where's the audit of that? Where's the investigation of who actually gets access to it. If I'm the bad actor, that's where I would go. They're handing it over, right?
Absolutely.
And I've mentioned this before. SLI compliance is owned by Gaming Labs International. Gaming Labs International, in one article, it boasted about them that they had 90% of the compliance of the gambling industry worldwide. 90%. That's a monopoly, okay? And they have offices in Macau, China, on the coast of China, and that is known as the Las Vegas of China. And one article I read said it is 5 times bigger gaming industry than Las Vegas, Nevada.
Wow.
In Macau, China. And that's where Gaming Labs International has a major test facility, major test lab. Question: did our hardware or software ever leave the country? Did it ever make its way to Macau, China? SLI compliance is owned by Gaming Labs International, who has labs all over the world, including in China. In fact, that's one of their biggest labs, is in China. So that's a huge question. Has anybody investigated that? Instead of investigating the investigators, let's investigate the things that really need to be investigated.
Well, let's get into your background real quick, and then we'll dive into the Anderson Cooper piece here. So I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to read this whole thing out for you guys, because this is pretty important. This is not some, Joe Schmo that's endorsing Mr. Lenberg here. This is the affidavit of Sidney McNeil Gutierrez. I am a distinguished graduate of the United States Air Force Academy with a BS in aeronautical engineering and both an MA in a master's in management and an honorary doctor of science from Webster University. I'm a retired Air Force colonel, having served as a fighter pilot in the F-15 and a test pilot in the F-16 while flying over 30 different types of aircraft and spacecraft. I was nominated by the Air Force and selected by NASA as an astronaut, pilot, and space shuttle commander. I served as the pilot on the STS-40 Space Lab Life Sciences, SLS-1, and commander of STS-59 Space Raider Laboratory, SRL-1. Both missions were recognized with the Aviation Week and Space Technology laurels for outstanding achievement in the field of space. After retiring from the Air Force and NASA, I joined Sandia National Laboratories, where I served as a center director responsible for programs including satellites, space payloads, sensors, vulnerability assessments, and analysis tools, international programs including support to the nuclear fuel cycle, and efforts to reduce the threat of terrorism and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. I've served on the board of several for-profit companies and numerous nonprofits. I served on NASA's Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel and the International Space Station Management and Cost Evaluation Presidential Task Force, reporting to President Bush. While at Sandia National Laboratories, I served as head of the Field Intelligence Element, with responsibility for all the intelligence work performed by Sandia Labs. In that capacity, I led a team of several hundred brilliant, innovative, and highly motivated scientists and engineers who work to protect the nation from threats to our nuclear weapons and limit the proliferation of the knowledge required to build them. Because of the catastrophic consequences of the failure to protect these weapons and this knowledge from people and governments with ill intentions, the resources devoted to this effort were significant and sustained. Eventually, this capability developed into what I would judge to be the best in the world. Federal law permitted other government organizations to utilize this unique capability, and based on a strong reputation, this organization supported most elements of the intelligence community, including the military. One of the areas of expertise was the ability to find sophisticated subversions deliberately implanted in complex systems by our enemies, including the most advanced nation states. Finding subversions of this nature would be analogous to, in some ways, to a financial forensic audit. A standard audit checks to see if, quote unquote, all the numbers add up. But a forensic audit looks for actions that have been deliberately hidden. These nefarious actions will usually have been done in such a manner that the, quote, numbers still add up, end quote. Often the only indication that a forensic audit is needed is that, quote, things don't seem right, end quote. In the same way it takes a special auditor to complete a forensic audit, it takes a special individual or team to find a subversion to a complex system. The people on the team of professionals that I led were handpicked because they possessed the special sixth sense. A subversion is able to hide because it relies on certain common human tendencies and assumptions. One of the most common vulnerabilities exploited is the natural human tendency to assume a discrepancy is the result of an error rather than a product of a deliberate act. The people on this team, quote, thought differently, end quote, and did not fall victim to these vulnerabilities. You are probably not aware of their success because their work they did was classified and not published. They were not allowed to write papers or make any public claims of success. This is why I'm writing this affidavit, because the specifics of the work these individuals did and its impact on national security is known only to a small group. I can say that at one point, I was asked to select a team to review a very sensitive program that was regularly briefed to the president. Because of the sensitivity of this compartmentalized program, I was only allowed to have 2 people briefed into it. From the several hundred people, handpicked professionals working for me, I selected Jeff Earl Lenberg as the best among the best. I am writing this affidavit to attest to his expertise. I cannot detail the specific work he did because it is classified. I cannot detail the impact of that work because it is too sensitive. But I can tell you that he has extensive experience dealing with systems that are controlled remotely under conditions where access must be limited. He is equally qualified to work on hardware and software and across interfaces between the two. And he is one of those unique individuals with that sixth sense to find vulnerabilities regardless of where they might be hidden. I can also attest to his outstanding character, absolute honesty, and excellent reputation within the small classified community where he did most of his professional work. Finally, Jeff Lenberg is one of those people I would trust with my life. I would be happy to answer any further questions you might have as long as they are not classified in nature. Under penalty of perjury, I hereby declare and affirm that the above stated facts, to the best of my knowledge, are true and correct. Jeff, I got to say, that is above and beyond anything that I've ever seen brought from any expert from the other side in this. And I use that term loosely. That is absolutely incredible.
Well, I count it a great privilege to just have met Sid, but to go on and work with him and then become good friends. I can tell you, I have the highest admiration for the man. With his credentials and history, you would think this would be a guy with a big head. He doesn't have a big head. He's one of the humblest guys I know. And he's got a strong faith in God, and he is just a delight to be with because he's just one of the most outstanding people I've ever met. And you read a bit of his track record there. I mean, how many people have done the scope of stuff that he's done? He went on after this and became the CEO of a rocket motor company. So he actually was off developing rocket motors here, and so in the recent past. I mean, the guy's capabilities are astounding. His history, his experience, his accomplishments. He's in an astronaut Hall of Fame. Wow. The guy is astounding. I think he was the first Hispanic in space. He set a bunch of firsts. Incredible man. And it's such a privilege to have worked with him and to be able to call him my friend.
All right. So now what I want to do, and folks, please just go through, read that affidavit for yourself. Okay. Look at this man next to me here. Okay. That is being dragged through the mud in this case is literally entrusted, or was literally entrusted, to secure and find vulnerabilities in nuclear secrets, in stuff that is way beyond the scope of anything that you or I could possibly imagine in terms of, the level. I mean, you had to have clearances for this, correct?
I had to have the highest clearances you can have. And I had them all.
That always makes me, that always aggravates me when we talk about this, because I know Ben Cotton also has a lot of clearances, and I don't know what Jack Cobb has. Nobody has even spoken to Jack Cobb. He has not, come out and debated anybody. This is the president of ProVNV who did all these audits in these other places. What I want to do now is I want to go through. We're going to go through this video from CNN.
This guy, smiling for the pictures, is running to be the top law enforcement official in the state of Michigan. So why is he also running from us?
Mr. DePerno, we'd like to give you every opportunity to answer some questions.
Matt DePerno, the Republican candidate for Michigan's Attorney General, is also under criminal investigation for a conspiracy to unlawfully obtain access to voting machines, though he hasn't been charged. He is also one of the main sources of the biggest lie surrounding the 2020 election, a debunked tale that Dominion voting tabulators changed votes from Trump to Biden. His campaign manager initially told CNN DePerno would do an interview. That didn't happen.
So he mentions there a debunked tale that Dominion machines change votes from Trump to Biden. Okay. I love the way that they continue to say debunked, election deniers and so on. And they just always state that in their articles that, hey, this is the case. I don't know how you can debunk something when you're a fact checker with a journal degree who doesn't investigate anything, right? Who literally is going out and looking at maybe a DHS website or some official pronunciation from the EAC or who knows who. These people haven't investigated anything. That's the whole point, is when these things don't look right, like in Antrim, what occurred in Antrim, that Matt DePerno had the bravery to step into and to look at, things did not work right. There is no question in this case, in Antrim, that on election night, those tabulators and that system produced wrong results, massively wrong results. Okay, there's no question about that on election night, those machines were off by thousands of votes, and they ended up giving thousands of votes more to Biden and thousands of votes less to Trump on election night. And oh, by the way, that likely happened down ballot also to other people on the ballot. This isn't about Trump. This is about everybody. If election systems don't work and there can be manipulated, then any race can be manipulated. Judges can be manipulated. Senators can be manipulated. House of Representatives, Secretary of State, Attorney General, anything that's on the ballot can be manipulated. And so this isn't about one candidate. It's not about just a presidential race, which is an important one, but all the other ones are important too. They need to be correct. And when things don't work right, they need to be investigated. So this idea that because you go to investigate something that obviously did not work right, you're a criminal, you're an election denier. No, you're doing the country a service by understanding what happened. We need to understand what happened so that we make sure it never happens again. Because there is no debate in the facts that on election night in Antrim, it was off by thousands of votes. In addition, in Berry County on election night, we have a screenshot, an affidavit that shows Rocky De La Fuente with over 8,000 votes that evening. In the end, he ended up getting 35 votes. Another major anomaly. How did Rocky De La Fuente get 8,000 votes? He was leading Trump and Biden on election night. That anomaly needs to be fully understood and explained. Not written off, not ignored, not saying you're an election denier if you want to investigate to find out what actually happened. You cannot give people confidence if you say, just don't look here. Something didn't work right. Let's just not look here, okay? If we look here, if we ask questions, we might make people think they can't trust the system. Well, you know what? If you don't ask the questions, then people don't trust the system. It's the other way around. You must question the system when it doesn't work right. When it appears to have not worked right, you have to get to the bottom of it. And that's what this team was all about, was get to the bottom of it, okay?
I want to go back to Mr. Gutierrez, Colonel Gutierrez. I want to go back to his affidavit right here, because this line spoke to me when I was reading it just now. One of the most common vulnerabilities exploited is the natural human tendency to assume a discrepancy is the result of an error rather than a product of a deliberate act. Now, Jeff, we can go back to, it's funny, a friend that we both mutually know sent me an article the other day, and it was a diamond in the rough, because it was an article about Smartmatic and Dominion, both of them together in the same article, because they don't work together. But 10 years ago, they wrote about this, and he thought that it was a current article. So he sent it to me all excited because it flipped votes, and they blamed the memory card for the votes flipping, which is what they've blamed in Antrim County. It's what they blamed in DeKalb County. It's what they blamed in Cherokee, Kansas. It's what they've blamed every single time in Floyd County, Georgia, in Coffee County, Georgia, in I think it was Gwinnett or Gillette. There's another place in Georgia. All over the place, you see this excuse of memory cards. Well, this article was about Smartmatic and Dominion going back to the Philippines in 2010. We saw
I've seen it.
The Teodoro Loxon video where he called Hyder Garcia a son of a bee, because, he said, you told us we could find this. But what you're looking at in this article is them literally saying it. And I'll put a picture of the article up here in a second and link it down below. They're literally saying it was an error card, a memory card. And then we move on to Georgia, and we have this Dominic Alomo that was working for Dominion during the Fulton County election in 2020. He was working for Dominion as a Fulton County tech. And we had the same thing from him. It was a memory card error. Don't worry, we'll fix it. We literally have video where he says the same exact thing in 2020 and then repeats it in 2022. Oh, we'll set up SOP so that this doesn't happen again. Same thing with the memory card, except this time now he doesn't work for Dominion. He works for Fulton County. He's an employee of Fulton County. So when you see something like that, what Colonel Gutierrez said here about, it's not a human error. That's what they'll tell you, but somebody needs to look into that, because you're talking about a $26 trillion economy. You are talking about the biggest economy in the world. Maybe, it's rivaled by China, but still the biggest economy in the world. And people just want to look at this and say that was a human error. That wasn't deliberate. Nothing to see here. Don't investigate. It's insane.
Yeah, agreed. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, where they just want to say it's human error. But by the way, in that 2010 election in the Philippines, quite a while back, I did some research on that. I came across that also like a year and a half ago. And there was something else in there. It turns out that there was actually a software review that was done in that time frame for that equipment that identified that the equipment was deficient in error handling, that its error handling was absolutely a mess. It was deficient and it needed to be fixed. And lo and behold, if you know my discussion about Antrim and what happened there, the error handling did not work. Okay, it did not work correctly. So you got to ask yourselves, was that problem known in 2010? Was it left there on purpose? Was it not fixed? How many other error handling problems are in the system? Was it really a bad programming, or did they trip across something that someone put in there on purpose and it's been left in there on purpose? We don't know. That's what needs to be investigated. You got to get to the bottom of this stuff and find this out. Not just say, nothing to see here, folks. Oh, we're concerned that people will not believe our machines and believe our counts if you bring this stuff up. No, people will not believe it because they've heard about this stuff. These anomalies are known. They exist. The people have reported these. We have to get to the bottom of them, and no one wants us to, but we have to. That's the only way you get confidence in a system or eliminate the system. In this case, I think the system absolutely has got so many holes in it. I call it Swiss cheese. It's got to be replaced. It's got to be replaced. It's just so widespread issues in the system, and we'll talk about that another time.
I'm at the point now, Jeff, when I write an article and it's about something that happened, I just write human error, strike through, technical glitch, strike through, nothing to see here. And that's what I end with, because we just get the same, the feed is the same thing over and over again. Human error, technical glitch, and it was fixed. All right, let's jump back into this, to the video here.
Mr. DePerno, can we just have a few minutes of your time? We've been trying to ask you a question for like a month and a half. What were you trying to do with those tabulators? What were you trying to prove?
DePerno and 8 others tried to prove there was fraud in the 2020 election. According to the current state attorney general, they illegally seized voting machines and broke into the tabulators and performed tests on the equipment.
We've been able to show through our case how the machines can actually manipulate votes.
It is simply nonsense.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the exact words they just said there prior to that. They were talking about the equipment, breaching the equipment, breaking into the equipment. They said the same thing in Georgia, breaking into the equipment, that we broke in. That's absolutely not true. When we were called up there, we were invited up there to be expert witnesses in that case. We were provided with equipment. We didn't go steal the equipment. There was a person that provided the equipment to us. His name is Michael Lynch, and he's the only one that provided equipment. He's the only one that picked it up, the only one that took it back, is my understanding. None of us on the expert team, and to my knowledge, nor the lawyers, actually got the equipment. It was a man named Michael Lynch, which interestingly, he is not named in any of the target investigation documents, which I find interesting because he's the one that actually got the equipment. The experts asked the lawyer present there, and Lynch, was this legally obtained? And we were told by the lawyer that it was legally obtained. We said, okay, so you've asked us to be here as part of expert witnesses in this case. You've given us legally obtained equipment to work with. You want us to test it. You want us to analyze it. That's what we did. Okay, so they make an assumption that it's illegally obtained. I'm sorry, to our knowledge, it's legally obtained. That's what we were told. And as far as I know, it's legally obtained. I'm not a lawyer, but it's my understanding, and I see it in the RFPs, that the counties actually buy their own equipment. They get grants to do it oftentimes from the state, but they buy their own equipment. They own the equipment, okay? And they're responsible for their own election. So if they want to provide election equipment to be tested, I would think that's up to them. If they want to provide equipment as part of any kind of investigation, and it's my understanding that some of that equipment came from Berry County. And I do know that Berry County had a major anomaly. I wasn't told originally where the equipment came from, but since then I've learned through other sources, on the network and so on, that that equipment came from Berry County. Well, they absolutely had a reason to be looking into it. One of the people named in the special prosecutor list is the Sheriff Darleaf. Well, if he's the sheriff of that county that had a major anomaly occur on election night, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me he has every right, and not just right, but duty, to look into it and figure out. I mean, he's the law enforcement. If something's gone wrong in that county, I would think he has the absolute right and duty to look into it.
Investigating the investigators. That's the biggest way to stonewall an investigation. You keep the investigators under constant threat of subpoena and all that other stuff. Mm-hmm. That's the strategy there.
At one point, DePerno even posted a video of one of his so-called experts breaking into an actual voting machine, unintentionally proving how difficult it would be to manipulate votes. Every machine would have to be physically breached, which is a crime.
What needs to happen here is database modification commands.
Jocelyn Benson is Michigan's Secretary of State.
That to me seems like a crime on video.
Sure does to me as well. Yeah, and as the state's chief election officer, my job is to report those potential crimes, which I did, and also ensure that any machines that were tampered with are decommissioned and replaced.
Go ahead.
So a lot of the meat of my concern is in that whole segment right there. So there's a bunch of stuff in there that's absolutely false, wrong, misleading, and even defaming. Okay, so they just accused me, CNN and the Secretary of State, Benson, of criminal activity. Okay, so to my knowledge, I have not been charged with any crime in Michigan, and yet CNN, if they put the word maybe or potential in front, I'm sorry, they're telling their listeners that I was involved in criminal activity. That's what they're implying. That's what they meant to imply, and that's what they're implying. I take exception with that. What we were doing there is absolutely called for, is absolutely legal. And I want to point out that what they said was criminal activity, they said I broke into that piece of equipment there. I want to explain what we did there. We had a forensic image that the judge allowed to be taken in Antrim County. We mounted it on a computer, our team did. That allowed us to then run tests, okay, to test the equipment, to run the EMS, to run the software. They said I broke into that software to manipulate the SQL, database that I was doing there. It turns out there was no password. You didn't have to break into it because there was no password. Now, we did actually get into the Dominion software, and we did do it by using a well-known exploit to change the password, since we didn't know the password, to get into it. So we went into it. That's correct. We did. But we did exactly the same thing that Alex Halderman did in his report that he submitted to Antrim, where he determined it was human error. He describes that he got a forensic image, that he mounted it, that he used that very same exploit to get into the Dominion software and to manipulate the system. Secretary Benson hired Alex Halderman to do that analysis and write that report. If what I am doing in that video is criminal activity and need to be investigated, then she just on camera said that she hired someone to do criminal activity, and she must be investigated because she hired, I was not paid to do what I was doing. She paid someone to break into the computer. Of course, what she's saying is absolute nonsense. Neither Halderman or I were breaking into the computer. What we were doing was completely above board. We were asked to do it. It's a standard technique used when you want to do some analysis like this. So there is no criminal activity there. They're just claiming criminal activity there.
Right.
And if what I'm doing is criminal there, then what Alex Halderman did was criminal also, because he documented in his report that he did exactly the same thing that we did.
And just to be clear, we're not accusing J. Alex Halderman of a crime. I know you made that clear as well.
I'm not. I was tongue in cheek because it's nonsense. Neither Halderman nor we were breaking into that system. Okay, we used the same technique to be able to test the system. He did it, we did it, and there's nothing criminal about it. But she is implying it's criminal.
But now I want to go back to J. Alex Halderman because his name pops up everywhere around elections. Most notably with the report that he submitted in Fulton County in the Curling v. Raffensperger case that is under seal. You guys are being accused of a crime. You specifically are being accused of a crime here by the Secretary of State. And I do want to touch on what you said about, I don't care if they said possibly and all that stuff. I don't know if you read my article that I wrote last week about Coffee County, Georgia. And I went after the Washington Post, who took a picture from a surveillance camera of you and Doug Logan and made this seem like it's a mental game. It is really, going to what you asked me to watch earlier about Tucker's interview with Matthias Desmet. I watched that interview before we went on here, and it is a manipulation technique where you can show somebody a photo of a surveillance camera and it's grainy. It's not very good quality. You're natural, so you're not looking up at it smiling. And so you look, I don't know, perhaps you look mischievous. I don't know. But they'll put that out there and they'll say surveillance footage caught them going into the building, and immediately they've now put into their listener base this mental idea, this idea that what you were doing is a violation of the law. Then they say,
go ahead.
Well, then they say, this is another point that I hit, and I actually called the Washington Post and the AP out on this. They put in there the term breach, that you guys breached the equipment in this is referring to Coffee County, but it ties into what Jocelyn Benson just said here. But every single time that they mention breach, they put alleged before it. They know damn well that you didn't breach the system. They know that you were there at the behest of the county election supervisor, who is the authority over those machines. They know that this wasn't a breach, but they have to use the surveillance footage, the alleged breach. It is a psyop. It is a psyop, fifth warfare type ordeal that we're going through, and the media is complicit in it. And God bless you, Jeff, for calling them out on this. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's part of what we have to be doing. We've got to be calling these people out on what they're doing, and it may take defamation lawsuits. I don't know. There's certainly cases that can be brought forward here, and if one of these organizations ends up having to pay, $200 million in a defamation lawsuit to, hurt their bank account, their pocketbook, that maybe is the way to get them to start not doing this kind of stuff, to stop doing this kind of stuff. But they absolutely are trying to manipulate. I'll tell you, in that video, even in this one that was shown here, where they show me going into Coffee County, and as you said, they showed earlier when they released the Washington Post thing with the video with Doug Logan and I, that was so manipulated. A number of the locations actually showed the Strickland and Sullivan people being led in there by Kathy Latham, I think was her name. I never met her, by the way, but you wouldn't know that from the video, that I've never met the woman. Okay, because what they did is they ran the video with the Strickler and Sullivan people going in, and then Doug Logan and I show up a couple weeks later, but they ran that video right after it and made it look like we went into the thing 2 minutes after the other guys did.
Right.
And CBS actually ran a piece where they ran that loop over and over and over during the entire piece. They showed the door being open, she letting people in, and then immediately following Doug Logan and I walking in a few seconds later, while they talked about the breach and all this kind of stuff. So they clearly were tying us to the visit, which, by the way, was a legal visit of the professional, very professional forensics organization that did that work out of Atlanta and did it up in Antrim. These people know how to go in. They know how to access a hard drive, get all the bits off of it without disturbing the bits. They are professionals at doing that. That's why you hire them. That's why you bring them in, so that they can come in and not hurt or manage to change the evidence in any way, but get a copy of the evidence. That's what a forensic image is. That's what a Ben Cotton does. That's what Strickler Sullivan was doing, that organization. So it's absolutely legal what they were doing. They did it correctly. The other thing they do in the video is, like, they showed me going in by myself and they called it a restricted area. Well, you know what? That is where the office, I was in an office area. Okay. There was a door there with a glass wall. And of course, everybody has glass walls now that we have COVID. But even if it was there before COVID, look, there's no conference room out there. That's an office space. Yeah. And you go into that office space, quite often an election supervisor or an election people will invite you in. Now, if you claimed anybody that ever went into one of those spaces, escorted, by the way, I was never in any of those spaces without people there, the actual people that have the authorities there. Neither was Doug Logan. And I'm sure I wasn't there for the folks doing the forensic audit. But I'm sure that was the case as well, that they were always escorted in that space. But look, if you go to meet these folks and their meeting room is inside that space, you go in there and meet. There's a conference table right there. There's a table, okay? And you go in that space and meet. If you want to go into the election supervisor's office, and they often invite you into their office to sit down and talk to them, you go into what they were calling a restricted space. Okay, well, this is not a restricted space. That's not where the tabulators are stored. That's not where the EMS is stored, but they implied it was. In fact, on the video the other day, when they kept running it, they showed all that equipment out on the table. And they said, oh, look at all the computer equipment. And Kathy Latham is sitting with them in this restricted space where they're doing the forensics with all the computer equipment. You know what that was sitting on that table? Those were poll books. Okay, those poll books are connected to the internet. That is their function. They hook to the internet. Okay, it's actually been demonstrated to us that when they're connected to the internet, they have no security on them. You can go and listen to music at a music site. You can order a Domino's pizza. You can go do anything you want while you're running the election on that poll book. Okay, so them all concerned about access to the poll book is just nonsense, because
the poll books are accessible.
The poll books are accessible from halfway across the world. Okay, so that is made. They want to make you believe that there's some nefarious thing that went on there, and there was not. Okay, that was an office space with a bunch of poll books in there. It didn't have an EMS in there. It didn't have a tabulator in there, not that I could see, and I never saw one in that space. Okay, so they want you to believe that that was some super restricted space. It was not. If you locked up or claimed everybody was a criminal that went into that kind of office space inside a county office, clerk's office, or an election office, you'd have to, you wouldn't have enough space, jail space in the entire country to hold all the people that have been in that space. Okay. I have visited probably 4 or 5 locations like that where I've been in that space. I've been invited into that space to talk to an election supervisor. I've done it in Otero County. County clerk invited me in. Guess what? There's a little door there. They open it up, and guess what? I'm in the same space that they showed on the video there.
Right.
I'm in exactly the same space. I go through there and I go into the election supervisor's office at the back of the space. That is standard procedure. There's nothing nefarious about it. They try to make it out that it's nefarious. The other thing is, we all know there are cameras there. Look, we're pretty stupid, if they think we're doing something on the sly and we've got cameras recording everything we're doing. Of course we know there's cameras there. That wasn't a secret camera.
That's the PSYOP, Jeff. That is the PSYOP. They take the security footage and they get these lunatics that are like, oh, look, they got him on camera. He's going into the building, just like probably 300 other people throughout the course of that week.
It's a public office. The election office it's a public space. They open it up for various people at various times, and that's normal for them to do that.
And I want to go back to the Sullivan and Strickler thing as well, because a lot of people, this is another thing that the media is completely and totally being extremely nefarious in the way that they're reporting this Sullivan and Strickler. They are, like you said, that is so when I wrote my last article on the Gateway Pundit, I was talking to an attorney friend of mine down here that deals with business law and that kind of stuff. And a lot of corporate law now a lot of it is e-discovery. That's what it's called now. Discovery, if it's on, machines and software and all that, it's called e-discovery. And they have firms. I was asking about it, and he said, yes, there's firms that when you get something like a subpoena, when you go to discovery, when you have a litigation hold or something along those lines, you will do this. Now, was it necessary? So let me throw this out there. On January 5th, 2021, Coffee County was given a litigation hold from the Trump campaign, from the Trump legal team, as well as Lynn Wood's legal team. They were given a litigation hold, and part of that hold was the images and the machines and the tabulation devices and all that stuff. So it's not beyond a reasonable doubt that when Misty Hampton, who is the clerk, the county supervisor in Coffee County, when she witnessed that night, so they got it on January 5th. On January 5th, they also had the runoff. And that very night, she witnessed a Dominion employee fix a machine without ever touching the machine. So you want to talk about the poll books being online and all that stuff and whether or not the machines can connect remotely. The Dominions, the tabulating machine, the tabulator there, I think it was the ICC they were using at this point, because the ICC. Right, it was the ICC, because the ICC
high-speed scanner, which, by the way, is in a totally separate locked room.
Right.
Okay. It is a secure room. It's separate, and that's where the ICC is. Yeah.
Right. And so it's necessary that you put yourself in Misty Hampton in her mindset. When this guy is told, you have 30 minutes to fix this machine, or we're going to bring the media down here and we're going to show them what's going on with these machines. And the Dominion guy goes outside, comes back inside and says, try it again. It'll work. Never touched the machine. And it worked. Right. And it worked perfectly fine. And so, we talked about this on the Conservative Daily Show, so we're not going to go into that too crazy here. But that is the motivation. That is what Misty Hampton said. I have a litigation hold. I don't know what just happened with these machines. It looks like this machine was accessed remotely. I'm going to get this thing imaged ASAP so that I don't get sued or put in jail for violating a litigation hold, which is, even though it's not a court order, it is, there's a term for it where it is like binding. If you get a litigation hold and there's a presumption that there's going to be pending litigation, you have to follow that. If you don't, there's a presumption of guilt on whatever is deleted, is shown to be deleted. And so that's kind of the mindset. Now, Sullivan and Strickler, they came in, they documented it, or excuse me, they imaged it, and they brought it back and they secured it in their own facility, as they've done. That's literally what they do. They're a firm that holds discovery and chain of custody and all that stuff to document it. You can't find somebody more nonpartisan, unbiased, and third party. You cannot find somebody more third party and unbiased than a company like that. So that is just what we're up against right now with the reporting in the mainstream media, with everything going on right now.
Right. And, also on that, why was I there? I mean, I was there because we had gotten wind, our team, that that anomaly occurred. And of course, that's up my alley. You read that affidavit. It's like, okay, this is anomalous behavior. Let's not assume that this was a human problem. It doesn't sound like it. Let's investigate and see why this machine is working now when it wasn't before. And oh, by the way, can we make it not work? Right. And what does it take to make it go back into that state? So I have a background in testing as well. So years worth, over a decade or so, maybe 11 years worth of testing and test development prior to this other work. So at Sandia. So yeah, that's what drove me there. That's what encouraged me to go there. And if I can take a slight digression here, I didn't mention this earlier, but the question has been asked by people, and that is, okay, how much was I paid to do what I did? People will say, okay, who's paying you? How much were you paid? So I just want to set the record straight here. Okay. I have been paid for my labor $0. Okay. This entire time for my labor, I have been paid $0. Not only that, I told you the reason I didn't want to do this. I felt compelled by God to do it. I literally for a year dropped everything else I was doing. I had a contract that had I executed on it instead of dropping it, the previous year I had brought in $200,000 approximately in revenue for my company, consulting company here in the US. It's an energy related thing. And I gave that up. So I gave up $200,000 of revenue for that year to go off and do that. In addition, out of my own pocket, my family's money, IRA money, and so on, I spent $60,000 approximately of my own money. When I went to Georgia, I paid all my own expenses. I paid my flights, I paid my motels, I paid my food, I paid 100% of it. No one paid my expenses while I was down there. When I was in Michigan, fortunately, they were paying for my team up there. They were paying for the hotel and so on. And originally, just to set the record completely straight, they had agreed to pay me my normal consulting rate up there while I was there. And I began keeping track of the hours. But I never invoiced them. And the reason I never invoiced them was they were having trouble raising money. And I kept telling them, look, the first people you got to pay is our security team, because we had a full bore security team. And the reason we had a full bore security team was our concern about a potential nation state actor being involved. Because if there is one, I'm not saying we determined there was one, if there is one, they would have unlimited resources and they would have a tremendous reason to make sure we didn't find anything. So there would be all kinds of potential ways they might try to disrupt us. And so we had a full bore security team, which was quite expensive to have up there 24/7. All right. And I said, you pay those guys first. You don't pay me until you pay them. So in the end, I never got paid. Okay.
Wow.
And that's fine. I was never paid anything the entire time. And to this date, I have not taken any money for labor from anybody. I've had people reimburse expenses. If I've had to buy equipment, anything, software, whatever I needed to buy, sometimes that's been reimbursed, and sometimes it's not been reimbursed. So I have put a ton of money, over $250,000, into this effort of essentially my own money.
Wow.
All right. So there's zero financial interest from
Right.
me
Well,
for me in this. There's none. It's cost me time, and it's cost me a lot of money, and it's also, you know, the concern about standing up and then people coming after you or canceling you or doing things to you or your family because of it. I know a lot of people have gotten death threats that have stood up. In my case, it's a little bit harder because I'm not on social media, and so it's it's a little harder to do the death threats because I'm not on social media, so it's really hard to get those things to me. So anyway,
well, so that all plays into that photo, that poster you held up earlier. You know, they can do whatever to us. We got to do this for our posterity. You know, for our children.
Yeah, no matter what the cost personally, the right thing to do is to stand up, because if we don't stand up now collectively to any kind of issues and tyranny that might be going on, it will only get worse and get harder and harder to stand up. And history shows this. I mean, you know, the German people, once they were subdued, it became almost impossible to stand up.
Yep.
And so, and we saw this in after World War II in Europe. Many of those countries that became satellites of Russia, it literally took them decades to overcome it and to get enough people to stand up to where they overthrew those regimes. And so we should expect the same thing here. If we do not stand up against tyranny, what happens is decades, you're stuck there. It takes a long time to recover. I'm not the first one to say this. Many others have said the same thing. So we've got to make sure we can trust our election system. It is the only thing that stands between us and tyranny.
Absolutely.
Is being able to elect, not select, people with integrity, people that will actually serve the people of this country and not be in there for other purposes.
Yep. An agenda.
Corrupt purposes. So we need people of integrity, but they can't get elected if we don't have a system that is honest and fair. And we have to be able to trust our system. So we have to have investigators that will actually go into it and not be canceled, not be investigated, because we are trying our very best to do the country a service. And instead, what happens is we get attacked for it.
Yep.
And
like you said, where's the same scrutiny on J. Alex Halderman? And again, not accusing him of anything.
Yeah.
But where's that same scrutiny? Because this is this woman that's in this piece, and let's get back into the piece.
CNN has learned DePerno's so-called private investigation may have gone beyond tabulators and led to attempts to open sealed paper ballots. In an email to an attorney in March 2021, the clerk of Barry County, Michigan, says DePerno told her she would need to collect the ballots which are under seal, and that DePerno said they will be opening the ballot bags and resealing them. The clerk refused.
Okay, so on I haven't talked to Matt about this at all, but I want to say, if you'll notice in that piece, they say in an email, Matt DePerno did so and so. If you look at that email,
it's hearsay.
It's not an email from Matt DePerno.
Right.
That's an email from someone to someone else who said that Matt DePerno said that. Okay, we don't even know when this email was created. Just because it has a date on there, if I'm a bad actor, I could have created that last week.
Right.
I could have created that at any time. To say where does it have Matt DePerno on there? Okay, it's from Pam someone. I don't even know who these people are, but there's not Matt DePerno. So to insinuate that this is truth because it's in an email from someone to someone and it's not from Matt DePerno,
Well,
I'm sorry.
And
That's
here's
completely hearsay, and this is defamation, I think, against Matt DePerno. By the way, I was involved in no way in whatever this interchange was, so I don't know the facts of this, but
right.
I can tell you what I can say about this is, who knows? I'm just going to, from an outsider, take a look at this and say, maybe Matt DePerno called him and said, hey, we think you have every right to count your own ballots. You, election supervisor, they're your ballots. They belong to you. You can count them. We're asking you to go get your ballots, unseal your ballot boxes or bags, count your ballots, and of course you're going to have to reseal them when you're done, and do that all under proper chain of custody. Maybe Matt called someone and had that discussion. Could have been. I don't know. I mean, all over the country, people were trying to get access to ballots, and there's nothing illegal with that. We did get access to ballots in Otero County and some other counties. We got access to count ballots. They're public records. Okay, so getting access to ballots or requesting access to ballots is not illegal. There's nothing nefarious in asking to get access to ballots. But again, just like the videos, they're making this out to be some nefarious activity. And I don't care if it's Matt DePerno or anybody else asking the question. You can ask the question. Right. I mean, those ballots belong to that entity, and they have every right to open those up and count those ballots anytime they want. Okay, well, and reseal them.
And so I looked it up. Pam Palmer is the clerk in Berry County, and Alan Vanderlaan looks up to be an attorney. I don't know if it's Berry County's attorney or what, but it's an attorney. So the problem I'm having here is that, this is the clerk, and you have an attorney saying that please get all the ballots together. They're under seal. Get them all together. And we're going to be coming in and opening the ballot bags and resealing them. So if they come in to do that and they have a court order or, anything along the lines, a legally binding document to do so, you have to let them do that. If they don't, you're the clerk. You just say, you're not opening the ballots. I don't understand. Like, there's not a crime here. This is, I don't know. Did you want to discuss anything else on this?
No, it just seems like, whether he or anybody else made the request, if the clerk deems it not appropriate, the clerk can say, no, that's not appropriate. Absolutely. But the clerk just as easily could have said, yes, of course it's appropriate to do that. Those are our ballots. And so you can do it. And so we'll arrange for the proper chain of custody and authority. When we did it in New Mexico in multiple locations, county clerk is there. It's in a big open space. They hand over ballots a certain number at a time. Chain of custody is handed over, they're run, imaged, and then they're handed back. And everybody's watching everything. It's all on video, and everybody was happy. Okay? There's nothing illegal with that. That's totally legal to ask for ballots, to look at ballots, to scan ballots, as long as they're properly controlled in the process. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. There's nothing nefarious in asking for ballots.
Michigan's results were not only certified, local audits and a state Senate report led by Republicans found no evidence of widespread or systematic fraud.
The report is adopted.
Yeah.
That blew my mind, because I know for a fact, and I've asked Matt DePerno about this many times, and I've called out politicians in Michigan that have said this publicly, Jack Malley being one of them, Jack O'Malley. There were a couple legislators, assemblymen and women, that asked Matt to look at the evidence. For the most part, Ed McBroom included, nobody asked to look at this evidence. Nobody asked.
Well, it goes even further, as Matt offered.
Right, exactly.
That we would come and present the evidence, that he would bring his experts and we would come and present the evidence. Okay. So I know for a fact that offer was made to do that. And in my discussions with Matt way back when. So if I remember correctly, he told me that he made that offer more than once. And so this is the same nonsense that we have seen elsewhere, where there is evidence and the body that's supposed to look at the evidence refuses to look at the evidence. And then they come out and they say, we have seen no evidence. And it's true. They've seen no evidence because they refuse to look at the evidence. Bill Barr did exactly the same thing.
Yep.
Okay.
And we just found
at the
that out.
national level. At the
Yep.
national level, he did exactly the same thing. They did not. What we did not find, we found in all the locations we went to, the one thing we never found was a federal agent looking into any of it. Okay. So, you know, I think Rudy Giuliani said it the best a long time ago, maybe a year and a half ago, when Bill Barr said, "I've seen no evidence." Rudy Giuliani's response was, "I have seen no evidence that you've done any investigating." Okay. And that was the response. And that's absolutely true. There was essentially no investigating done other than investigating whistleblowers, investigating the investigating. So they investigated the guy that talked about, you know, that he believed that he trucked ballots across the state line, a big truck full of ballots. And so they went after the guy instead of the guy that was reporting it. They go after him, you know, for whatever. So that they did. They went after people. And the other thing that I'm going to talk about briefly here, I don't know if you'll edit it out or not, but is what we did run into is that there were people within infiltrating within the organizations that were trying to figure out what was actually going on in the election, what happened. There were people that were not there to help, that were there to gather information, and that were there to mess things up, if you will. There are quite a few people that believe that those were FBI informants that were inside the operations. We know that this occurred at a couple different times. I think it's out there now about some of these names of people that they're almost certain were FBI informants that were misleading people with information. And I will just tell you that we had that sort of thing, operations going against us with people regularly. Okay, regularly. And I will tell you also, because a lot of people are very naive on this, that there are cases, and this happens quite often, where they put someone into your camp who appears to be really wanting to help out, and they're not there to help out. A perfect example of this is General Flynn. You know, his first lawyers turned out to be not good lawyers. They gave him bad advice. He ended up going $6 million, I think, into the hole they charged him. They're the ones that told him to plead guilty when he wasn't guilty. And so he ended up getting rid of them and getting Sidney Powell. But someone convinced him up front that they were good lawyers to have, and they were going to do right for him. And it appears that they were not there to help him. And I have personal experience myself. I believe we saw that in New Mexico, where the lawyer working with us on audits quite a while back, not recent, but back in that time frame in December, was making decisions and doing things that was not in the best interest of the audit. You know, that was doing things to mess it up. And so that quite often, unfortunately, is the case, that it's often a lawyer. It's not always a lawyer, but quite often they get a lawyer in there who gives bad advice, I believe on purpose, to make your case not viable or to go sideways. Okay. And it's very possible because we see them trying to create these situations where it's an entrapment scheme, right? So we know about the Whitmer entrapment scheme that occurred up there, the Whitmer kidnapping, where 3/4 of the people, according to Tucker, on his separate channel, Fox Nation or whatever it is, he did that special. Yep. That was multiple time Patriot, whatever. And in there, he talks about this, you know, that 3/4 of the people involved in that were FBI agents or FBI informants, including the leader of the group. That was an entrapment scheme. Yep. It turns out, he points out, that was done in Detroit. It was run out of the Detroit office, and that regional Detroit FBI director, he points out,
DC.
Went to DC before January 6th.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff out there now that, videos, documentaries, and so on various different channels talking about Fedsurrection, and that was a setup at the time. I will give you one thing ahead of time, and that is our little group. Someone gave us a call, someone that had access, and said, look, there are Antifa bad actors. We've got word on this. They must have had people inside the group to come into DC for January 6th. And they said the local authorities have all been notified. We know where they're coming from. We know their routes, and we know they're coming in mass. Okay. The DC police did absolutely nothing. And they were warned ahead of time.
Yep.
That's what I'm told. This is all secondhand, but that's what I'm told. That they knew this was occurring. I know a couple people that were in the crowd, headed towards the Capitol. They didn't make it to the Capitol, but they were in the crowd, and they described, one of them being a retired FBI agent, okay, retired, and they described, it turns out it was two women, they described how they saw a different group of people coming in from the margins, and basically they put themselves in the front of the group, and these ladies ended up kind of in the middle of this, and they said, this is really, really bad. We don't like this. We know this is not good. And they turned around and they left. Okay. And so, this was a firsthand account that I got from someone that said there were foreign actors of some sort. When I say foreign, not part of the rally, who joined in at the beginning of that group that was headed to the Capitol and basically took it over.
Yep.
So, so it's sounding a lot like there may be something to this idea of Fedsurrection.
Absolutely.
And setting people up. And it's possible. I don't know. I will just say this. Up in what we did in Michigan, to my knowledge, that their acquisition for us of those tabulators was legal. Okay. They told us it was legal. We believed them when they said it was legal. If it wasn't legal, I would really start to wonder if there wasn't an entrapment scheme going on.
Well, if it wasn't legal, why aren't we seeing reported stolen property? I mean, if these tabulators were obtained from a county clerk or something along those lines, there should be accountability. I mean, it's not like somebody's breaking into the election warehouse and taking it out and then putting it back in, and nobody's checking on this. Like, where's the crime accusations that tabulators are being stolen and then brought to you guys under the guise of legally obtained? This is just absurd to think that this would happen like that.
Yeah. And the other thing that is bizarre about this is the timing. And we haven't talked about this yet, but we need to go into this.
Let's save the timing for the end, because there's a lot to talk about. But going back to this report, I mean, they go out there and they taunt the fact, or not taunt, but flaunt rather. They flaunt the fact that this report was done by Republicans, and looking at McBroom, looking at the guy Jack O'Malley. Jack O'Malley actually put out a video, and this is why I got so involved in that. He put out a video where he said that these people said that ballots were coming in a wagon in the middle of the night and all this stuff. And then he shows a video of a camera crew bringing in camera equipment on a red wagon, and Kelly Sorrell videotaped it, and was actually Kelly Sorrell just was arrested, by the way, by the J6 committee or by the FBI because of J6 type stuff. But Kelly Sorrell filmed it and was like, hey, what's going on here? Why are you bringing that in? And that's what Jack O'Malley said was, whatever. And he said, I'm sorry, there's nothing here. Basically, he was getting pretty condescending towards the people making these accusations. What he didn't know is that Gateway Pundit obtained footage of literally a van in the back of the TCF Center in the middle of the night at 4:30 in the morning, twice, dropping off upwards of 60 boxes of ballots. Now, there was also a car, like a lead car that would come in ahead of time, give the security guard something, we don't know what, give him something, drive away with Pennsylvania plates, and then the truck came in. Then Patty McMurray of 100% Fed Up pulls up a video of Indiana license plates on a minivan with over 4,500 ballots in that and only one driver. You know, there's a chain of custody. You can't have just one guy. There has to be a Democrat, Republican. You know, there has to be a proper procedure for this. But why is an Indiana plate van with Detroit magnet placards, the city of Detroit placards, dropping off ballots? But O'Malley didn't want to deal with any of that, and he wanted to lie and say that DePerno never emailed him about the evidence and presenting the evidence when I have the email. You know, so that's what we're up against in this, and we that kind of actually ties into the end.
Yeah, and so that's a huge problem, and that, you know, the Senate there. They say, "Oh, it's the Republican Senate that did this report and said nothing to see here."
Couldn't care less what your party denomination is.
Yeah, they refused. I've said it all along. This is not about one side or the other. This is not liberal versus conservative. It's not Democrat versus Republican. Everybody should be concerned about our election system.
Amen.
I don't care who you are. You want to know that whoever gets elected was actually elected and not selected. I don't care what party you're from. You absolutely want to know that. And unfortunately, I believe there's people willing to be corrupted on either side of the aisle, that it's not specific to one party. And by the way, if the way I think the system is set up and the data that I have, the way it might be manipulated, they can do it for either party. So they can do it in any race for any candidate, any which way they want. And so, yeah, it's not just one party, it's all the parties. And so, yeah, I just want to say it's totally unacceptable that they refuse to hear the evidence. Then they put out reports saying we've seen no evidence.
Yep.
And it was done in Michigan. It was done at the federal level. That is not acceptable. That is very misleading. They didn't lie. They've seen no evidence because they refused to see the evidence. They refused to hear the evidence. They refused to gather the evidence. And that's not good. That's very bad for our system.
So what you just said about the party affiliations and not caring one way or the other about that, it resonates with me on a level that you can't imagine, because I do believe that this has been going on for a while. I do believe our elections have been a facade for quite a while. And I also believe that they understand that there has to be a balance, because if the Democrats just constantly win, they'll look at this and say, well, we're just a Democratic nation and we're going to go to crap. So they have to find some balance on the, what I call the kitchen table topics that we can deal with. But there's still this selling out of the country to foreign entities, you know, allowing corporations to go offshore, and then, you know, circumventing tax laws, U.S. tax laws, corporatocracy, all sorts of stuff that goes on that people don't even understand is going on. Or, I mean, most people listening to this probably understand, but your average American doesn't understand what's actually going on right now. And they don't understand that, you know, the elections are just there to give you this warm and fuzzy feeling that, hey, we've got 4 years of a Republican now, everything's going to be good if you're a Republican. Or we've got 4 years of a Democrat, everything's going to be good if you're a Democrat. It's that mass formation that Desmond was talking about in that piece. But let's get back into this, because we're going. Do you have something you want to add, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I was going to say absolutely. You mentioned that you believe this is going on for some time, and I actually was involved going back decades ago, and so I have information about it in the 1995 timeframe, 92-95 timeframe. So yes, election issues have been going on for a very long time, and I don't believe most of the candidates even have any idea if someone's tipping the scale in their favor. I believe they're picked for two reasons. If they're being selected, they're selected for two reasons. Number one, their ideology, so that you can kind of believe that they'll vote a certain way based on their demonstrated ideology, whatever that might be. And then the second reason is their corruptibility, their lack of integrity. They want people that you can go in, put a little pressure on, grease a palm, and you'll get them to vote the way you want them to, and go along with whatever. And I think we see that going on a lot, where, you know, in the press they're doing this, but behind the scenes they're doing this.
Yep.
Okay, they're cooperating. So
it's so much worse. We have the document that you have to sign in assembly, and I'm not going to say what state, but when the incoming assemblymen or legislators get to their position and they come in, they have to sign a pledge that they're going to toe the party line. I'm not kidding you. Like, I have this document that they're going to toe the party line. We had a woman that's running for Congress, a state house out in another state. I don't want to throw out names again. She came out and said that she was at an introduction, and they told her, we don't care what they say at public comment during these hearings. We already know what we're doing. The public comment is just a waste of time. It's so bad, Jeff. It really is.
What's so alarming is that DePerno's scheme in Michigan is linked to others just like it across the country. Authorities in multiple states are investigating voting machine breaches. In a Colorado case, 2 men who worked with DePerno were named on a warrant in a federal investigation for identity theft and intentional damage to a protected computer. Also named Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy.
Just demand an audit.
Who's been one of the most vocal spreaders of lies about voting machines. And in Georgia, this surveillance video shows DePerno's IT expert. Remember the guy from that video?
Hey, you caught it at a good spot there.
Remember what I told you about the surveillance footage? The concept of surveillance footage to people is automatically mischievous and nefarious. That's our it's ingrained in our psyche, so that if we see security footage, you can make it look like it's something nefarious. So they've got you on the right, a screenshot with kind of an awkward kind of pose, kind of looking. And then you have walking into this room. Nobody else is in the screenshot, but if they zoom out, I'm sure there's more people in the room right there.
Actually, someone is in the screenshot. I think if you look at it when they first do it, there is a person sitting at that desk. So there's clearly someone else in the room.
Right here.
Yeah, when I come in. So
yeah,
right I'm not unescorted into that room. They let me in there. I don't know if I was on my way to Miss Hampton's office. The bathroom is back in there. I might have been going back to the bathroom. I don't know. But that's an open office area there. That's not where they store their tabulators. That's not where they have their EMS. It's an office space, okay? It's just an office space. Yeah, you've got me on camera going into an office space, okay? A public building. With an office space that I was invited to go into that had the appropriate people there. I wouldn't have gone back in there at all, by myself without having people. And that's one of the things that, they have Doug Logan and I, we both said right up front. I said, look, I never want to, touch your EMS, your tabulators, because we don't want to have anybody say that we somehow took chain of custody of your stuff. You have chain of custody. We will never be with it unattended. We'll never be in here without you here. We're not going to operate your equipment. Okay. You have to run your tabulator. You have to run whether it's high speed or low speed tabulator. We made that very, very clear that we didn't want any concerns or issues about decertifying anything or chain of custody or whatever. So, that was right up front. We did that. And so, them implying all kinds of other stuff without them knowing the facts is slander. That's very poor investigative reporting. It looks to me like negligent investigative reporting. In other words, there was no investigation done.
No, but they just use those words that protects them. And that's something that is really disgusting, because you're running. So I had somebody, an article that I wrote recently, I had somebody reach out to somebody I know and reached out to me as well through the comment on there and said, it was so refreshing to see a good story about me come out. And it was good that my kids saw a good story about me come out, because you guys are having your names drugged through the mud over BS, over absolute BS. It is insane to think that you could have your name drugged through the mud for, it's not like you're taking these images and going back there. You're showing the people, this is what's wrong. Fix it. Look, you sat down on OANN and said, I can flip the votes with this software. I have to change one little thing because of the SQL database, whatever it might be. I'm not a tech guy, but you're showing the people what's wrong with these machines, and they want to make you a criminal for doing that. And it's absolutely insane what CNN, Washington Post, all these hack Mockingbird media outlets are doing to you people.
In a restricted area of an elections office where voting machines were breached. and another one of DePerno's IT experts, claims in a court case he forensically examined Dominion Democracy Suite voting systems in Arizona, Michigan, Colorado, and Georgia.
I don't know if you noticed, they didn't name who that person was that did all that forensic stuff, right?
Correct.
That was Ben Cotton. Okay. So we went over his bio earlier. This is a highly experienced, national level guy in this field of forensics that has a firm with like 50 people and does this for major corporations, very professional at this. And yes, he was asked to go into all those places and do it. And yes, he did it, or he analyzed it. He didn't necessarily go to all those places. He did do analysis on all those places.
Can I just add real quick? I remember during the hearing in Maricopa County, Ben Cotton said that he, did contract work for the Department of Defense and found an incredible vulnerability that nobody else found.
Let me talk about that.
Because this is a man that should be patted on the back and heralded as a hero. And
he is.
And they're dragging him through the mud.
He is. Ben Cotton, this is a great story. And this is, I've talked to Ben about this. So this is from Ben, even though I probably won't get it exactly right. But Ben was asked to come in, and I believe it was the Department of State, asked to come in and demonstrate his product that he had that would, excuse me. But anyway, so Ben was asked, Cypher was asked, and Ben was the guy to come in and present to the Department of State a tool that they could run on their network that looked for intrusions. Okay, it would help protect their network. And so he was approved for that. And they actually put his server on their internal restricted network. Okay, so they put it in there, they installed it, his equipment, his server. He brought the tools up. He was demonstrating the tools to them, to a group of them. He was giving his presentation, live demonstration of his tools. And he stopped and went, "Oh my, you've got intrusions here." And, as he's demonstrating it, he's finding stuff. And so that was the genesis. They began to dig in. And what he found was that the entire system had been overrun, intruded by a foreign entity. They were inside the Department of State network. Worse than that is that this whole system, which had to do with, if I remember correctly, it had to do with the information. What's the right term for it? But the personnel information. There's a massive government database. I'm in it because of my clearances. Anybody that had a clearance was in this database. Okay, and apparently it's interconnected across the various different agencies, and this network had been penetrated. And so he was able to find and show that they had penetrated, and they basically were in everything. He was also able to demonstrate or determine that it was the Chinese.
Wow.
Okay. Then there was a cover-up that began to occur. There was testimony multiple times before Congress. He was before Congress. They tried to claim that he never was there, never did that, never discovered anything, that they discovered something on their own, but he never discovered anything. And the story goes that he, I believe during testimony, said the person that said that to him, that had been told that, he said, "Well, that's very interesting." He said, "Because if I was never there and never did anything," he said, "my server is still inside that building on that network." And if I was never there, how did my server get in there, and why is it still there? And he said a day later, his server was returned to him after that testimony. Okay. They went in, took it, removed it, and returned it. So
I didn't know that. I didn't know that much of the story. I knew that he discovered some pretty big vulnerabilities in the
huge
in the system.
He found the Chinese inside of our
That's
system.
insane. And this man is being drugged through the mud. So I'm sorry for going off on that. So back to the states and how they don't mention that it was Ben Cotton.
Yeah, and talk about national level expertise. I mean, there's very few people that have found that kind of intrusion, and he found it during a demonstration, and then followed up and so on. So astounding. And they tried to smear him as a result of it. Fortunately, there were some people in Congress that stood up for him, but at the time, but they tried to smear him and make it sound like he hadn't even been there, which was totally bizarre. So, yeah, this is an outstanding person on this team that we have.
Secretary of State Benson says her state gave information to the Department of Justice.
I think we've seen on every level a lot of evidence that this is a nationally coordinated effort, whether it's to try to gain access to our voting machines, whether it is trying to run candidates who are spouting misinformation to become chief election officers.
In Michigan, not only is DePerno running for Attorney General, the Republican nominees for governor, lieutenant governor, and secretary of state all say they believe the meritless claim the 2020 election was fraudulent.
So a couple things there. One, of course, they're talking about the fraudulent again, the election deniers and so on. But I want to go back to where Benson was talking. Secretary of State Benson was talking about how this is a coordinated effort. Okay, again, that's a smear. Mm-hmm. You have a team of people highly qualified to do what we're doing, who know how to handle this information, who have, many of us have had high-level clearances and access to things that are extremely sensitive. And she's basically claiming that we somehow, were nefariously trying to work together to subvert the election system, basically, is what she's saying. So this whole thing of investigating the investigators to make it so that no one will ever listen or want to look at our election system and look into the anomalies, it's got to stop. I mean, this has got to stop. This is pure craziness, nonsense, and slanderous to be saying that we're part of some conspiracy or plot to basically take out the election system or to use it for nefarious purposes so we can get our candidates elected. I've already gone on the record saying I don't care which candidate gets elected. What I care about is that the people of this country elect them,
right?
And that they aren't, someone else is not selecting our candidates. That's what is so important to a real democratic republic like we have, representative government. We've got to be able to select our representatives and not have someone else influencing that. That is so critical to our democracy. And so that kind of slanderous thing about, well, this is a coordinated effort for some nefarious purpose. She doesn't know that. She's just making that claim.
Well, and even then, you look at what you guys were able to do. First off, you got a forensic image of almost every single place. I think every single place that Ben Cotton was able to look, there were images. It's not like he had the machine in his possession from a particular place, and they said, "Here's the machine. Go do what you want, and we're going to take the machine back when you're done." And that's what we have. When they take the image, that image doesn't get put back on the machine when they're done. They don't say, "Hey, go play with this, and we're going to reinstall it, and that's what we're going to start running." So to say that you could be nefarious in this. Sure, you could take this and understand how it works. You can understand how it's vulnerable, but that's no different than what, like we said earlier, that's no different than what Hari Hursty's done or J. Alex Halderman or any of these people have done with these machines. And to sit there and say, well, now that you have this forensic image, you've compromised the machines. Well, how so? They're not connected to the internet, as according to them, so you can't hack in remotely. Air quotes, big air quotes on that whole sentence. And then the other problem is, well, okay, what if you access it while you're voting? That's one of the other claims I've heard is you can do all this with a USB stick while you're voting. If that's the case, we have a much bigger problem than investigating you guys for trying to figure out how these things are vulnerable and whether or not vulnerabilities were exploited. We have a huge problem if somebody can hack into these voting machines in the 5 minutes that they're in there voting. And by the way, it's not like back in the day where you go into a room by yourself. The machines are out in the open. You know, at least in my precinct, when we vote, we've got a little thing on the side here, but, you know, we see what's going on. So Benson is kind of, she's grabbing at straws big time right here.
Well, this whole breach thing, let me talk a little bit about that some more, because they're talking about how, they get these experts to come on, so-called experts, I'll use that term, and say how this is unprecedented, how this could really damage our election system because we had access to these forensic images and so on. These people are clueless, okay? And the reason is our system is already so accessible. A bad guy doesn't need to go take a forensic image.
I mean, they do it at DEFCON every year. They open up Hackers Village.
Well, even worse than that. I mean, there are studies that have been done that these systems they claim that are not networked are networked, that you can access. There was even recent studies, I think in 2019, there was one where 30-some counties were easily accessed. The election equipment was remotely over the network. So, and I got to tell you, it's, you know, the typical county, it's not that they don't have good IT people. They do have decent IT, you know, everybody's got IT people. They put firewalls up, they put some stuff up. Okay. But we're not talking about world-class protection, security. Okay. We're talking about run-of-the-mill security. Now, if Capital One can be breached, who has world-class security, okay? If they can be breached and their information can be totally downloaded over the internet by some attacker, what do you think it's going to take to breach the typical county? Almost nothing. Okay, it's a sophisticated nation-state actor. It's a walk in the park to breach any of those systems. And so then they try to say, well, they're not networked. But of course, we've already shown they are networked because they put these listeners in many places on. They have the cell modems that talk to the listener that's hooked to the EMS computer. That's one example. But another one, in the state of New Mexico, there's this silly little form that they have that they get signed by counties saying, like 2 days before the election, we're verifying that our EMS is not currently connected to the internet so that we can run the election. There's a form. There's a form that we actually got from a FOIA that they signed this form 2 days before the election, basically saying that it's no longer connected to the internet. So how many of these machines are at times connected to the internet, even for a brief period of time? You know, many of them we know are sitting on a county network of some sort. It may be a restricted network with firewalls that has maybe, you know, the local police has, you know, some county level stuff on it. But the level of protection, if Capital One can't even keep, you know, a determined attacker from getting into it, the typical county is not going to be able to protect against it. You know, maybe an atypical county with a really good IT set of people and appropriate funding could do a pretty decent job, but most counties aren't going to be able to do it. So saying that this is unprecedented, you know, access to this information, these election systems, is just not true. It's you know, it's generally accessible. And then also you've got the Pro V&Vs and you know, SLO compliance. They're handed access to it. Right. So there are folks like that get access to it. They're, you know, supposedly there's escrow accounts where they put the software in escrow in essentially every state that's using this. They have it in escrow. Source code. Yeah. Well, boy, you give me the source code, I'm golden if you give me the source code. So, you know, how well is that source code protected? Maybe good, maybe bad. It depends on the state. I don't know. I know of a guy was explaining to me that, there was a meeting in the state of New Mexico, went into at the state level, and this guy brought his IT guy along and said, look, I want to help you guys. I think you need to beef up your security. And they had their state IT guy there who was saying, look, we have very high level security. We're very secure. Thank you very much. We don't need you. And meanwhile, his guy is sitting over there, and he turns and says, excuse me, do you want to know how much money is left in your bank account right now? And he turns around and shows him the number and says, this is your bank account, and this is how much is in it. And so, I mean, there are people that have the tools and the capability to, access stuff, even though it's so-called secured. The problem is, I don't want to denigrate the IT people, because they're doing the very best they can. I will tell you this: the offense, the bad actors, have a much, much easier job than the defenders.
Right.
Think about it for a second. It's like a dam. You've got a dam here. All the attacker needs to find is one little crack in the dam.
Yep.
One hole somewhere, one little crack, one tiny little crack that they can get into to defeat, okay, the system. The defender has to defend the entire thing, has to eliminate every hole. And with computer systems and software at the level they are today, with millions and millions of lines of code, there are holes all over the place.
Yes.
And you just can't, it's impossible to plug every one of those holes. Why do you think you get a vulnerability system update, multiple times a month? Because people keep finding holes, they exploit them. Then someone detects that they exploited that hole. Then they put out a patch to try to patch that hole. And there's a constant effort of doing that, because you know what? There's an endless supply of holes.
Yeah.
There's an endless supply of holes.
And adding in machines to this, in something that can be done on hand-marked paper ballots, by the way, with hand-marked paper ballots, your vulnerabilities are limited to physical vulnerabilities. Somebody has to physically be there in person, manipulating it there at that, to get to paper ballots. Whereas these machines, I mean, what you were saying earlier about, the water in the dam, you're talking about IT, county level IT that has a budget of maybe 50,000 a year, maybe bigger cities, 200,000, whatever it is for IT. You're talking about nations that would want to, or even not even nations, bad actors that have unlimited resources financially to get into here. I mean, all it takes, we've talked about this so many times, and it's crazy to think about this. All it takes is one compromised person in Dominion, in an elections office. And I'm not saying that, I'm not making an accusation here. I'm saying that's all you need is one compromised person. One, I made effing sure of it.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And I want to speak to that for a second. I think we've already passed the video part where he says that I demonstrated how hard it would be. So they showed where I was manipulating the EMS, and they said, oh, I just proved that this would be so hard because you'd have to run around and manipulate every EMS.
Every computer.
And that's every computer. And that's not true. Okay. Right. So I was showing for that particular example that I was manipulating the EMS, using the SQL tool that should not have been on there. Okay. SQL Server Management tool that should not have been on there, that had no password. I was demonstrating that, and I was making it in that particular case match up to what the tabulator did. That was the preliminary subversion report. If you go look at my expert reports, the next day, I advanced it slightly further, actually in a major way, and I made it so I didn't need to do anything to EMS at all. So I could manipulate the election files in such a way that the paper tape and the cast vote record, electronic record, were both wrong and agreed, and were different than the ballots. And you could put that on an EMS, unmodified EMS, and it would put through the bad information just fine. Okay. The problem with that is that those election files, I've described this before, they come from a central source. They come from the election designer software. And there's one, version of that essentially for each company that everybody uses. I mean, they have a copy of it. But if I get in and subvert that, if I figure out how to get in and subvert that, one person could subvert the entire country for that particular manufacturer.
Wow.
So no, it doesn't take anybody to visit all of those machines. You don't even have to be in the state. If you're a nation state actor who has the tools and the resources to get in one way or the other by hook or crook into the chain much higher up, earlier in the system, into that election event designer software, I could manipulate the entire country, all the elections across the country, by getting into that. Any place that machine was being used, and no one would know. There would be no indication of it. It would be very, very difficult to detect.
Well,
Okay?
in the case that was just filed in Fulton County, Pennsylvania, against Dominion, they cited specifically that they found Eric Spakeen in his analysis found a Python script that was uploaded after certification on one of the machines, and he also found an IP address on there from a Canadian IP, and he also found that those machines are on a local area, a local access network, a local area network, and if you can access one particular machine with that IP address, you at that point have infiltrated the entire system. You've infiltrated every system on that network. So, just playing into what we're talking about, and going back to Coffee County again, 30 minutes outside. Hey, the machine's fixed, but wait, you never touched the machine. Like, that's like when your car's not running right and you kick it and you're like, oh, now it runs right. This is without the kick. Like, you're not doing anything. It just runs right.
Should they win, they would control upcoming elections. In fact, 27 states have an election denier running for a position that could influence elections.
We're in a very dangerous moment right now. If people who are running on a platform of election denial, telling their voters that they will in fact put their thumb on the scale to ensure that their candidates win.
All right, so I got to stop it here because this is kind of in my wheelhouse here. This man right here, David Becker, is the founder of the ERIC system, Electronic Registration Information Center. He is the founder of the EOLDN, the Election Official Legal Defense Network. And he's also the founder of the Center for Election Intelligence, Election Information Resources, CEIR. I don't know the exact acronym. In 2020, Mark Zuckerberg gave $460 million, I believe, give or take, to shore up our elections, to make elections easier. 350 million or 400 million of it went to CTCL, Center for Tech and Civic Life. 69 million of it went to this man right here, CEIR. 50 times more revenue than they've ever shown on a single year. 50 times. He gave disproportionately, $12 million to Michigan. He gave 13 something million to Pennsylvania. They were number one. They got the most. Gave 12 million to Michigan. He gave, I think it was like 6 or 7 million to Arizona and I think Wisconsin was the other one. 4 of the top 6 states that they donated to 23 states, grants. They gave grants to. 4 of the top 6 states were swing states, the proverbial swing states that we know of. The other 2 was New York and New Jersey. Those 6 states averaged $8.7 million in grants from their company. Every other state averaged $1.5 million. Talk about disproportionately donating money. Michigan was unique in the fact that David Becker gave $12 million through CEIR to Michigan, but didn't give it to Jocelyn Benson's. And it's ironic that the 2 of these people are in this slam piece. He didn't give it to the Secretary of State's office. He gave it to the Michigan Center for Election Law and Administration, the MCELA, which is a nonprofit that was started by Jocelyn Benson back in 2006, ran by her up until 2019. She resigned in 2019 and handed it over to somebody that's in her administration, Sally Marsh, I think her name was. And then Sally Marsh, she was temporary, handed it over to Jenna McKernan. They get $12 million. Wow. They get $12 million to a nonprofit. Okay. That $12 million goes to 2 companies. Waterford Strategies and Alper Strategies. Both of them are well-known Democrat consulting firms. That's where all the CEIR money in Michigan went. How much, Jeff, how much of that $12 million do you think went to Republican counties?
I don't know.
I don't either, because we can't FOIA. There's no accountability.
Yeah.
We can't go in there. It says on their form 990 that if you call and request the form, they'll send it to you. But they don't have a website. MCELA does not have a website. They've never for the last 10 years, they've shown zero revenue every year except 2020.
Wow.
Well, they haven't shown. Excuse me. They haven't shown enough revenue to report. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
So talk about conflict of interest and talk about potential conspiracies. Like she said, oh, this looks like a national coordinated effort. You know, I've often seen that these people will claim you're doing what they're doing. They'll claim that you're doing something bad when that's what they were doing. I mean, you
watched my show before.
I mean,
that's my favorite line. When Democrats accuse you of something, it's because they're doing it themselves. And by Democrats, I mean establishment politicians.
And it's not just Democrats. It's across the board. You see people do this, and they'll accuse you of doing what they're doing. And so, I mean, there's some tremendous examples. I mean, part of the deal with Trump and the classified information, I mean, it's an open and shut case that Hillary Clinton was mishandling classified information. I mean, we all know that. I mean, it was in the press for a long time, and it's pretty well established. And so, you know, the fact that someone wants to hang that on Donald Trump, that he mishandled classified information, you know, that's what you want to do. Now, typically you do it ahead of time, accuse someone of what you're going to do so that when they catch you doing it, you can say, the bad guy can say, oh, you're just saying that because I pointed out you were doing that, right? It's like a little kid game that they play, and it seems to be quite effective because then everybody's confused because they're both pointing fingers at each other saying, you did it, right? And people go, okay, they're both out to lunch. They won't listen to either side. They don't learn the truth because they muddy the truth up with a bunch of lies. And so we see this tactic over and over. And so that's what's going on. It sounds like here to me, you know, maybe some things that might not have been appropriate were going on there, and influence going on that maybe shouldn't have been going on. I certainly think it's not appropriate for so much private money to be dumped in to create ballot boxes and do a whole bunch of things that, in my opinion, have made our system less secure. There are many things that make our system less secure, and that's one of them.
And it absolutely should not go to private nonprofits for the government to be distributing with no accountability. There's no oversight in where that money went with the MCELA or Waterford Strategies and Alper Strategies. And furthermore, here's something, and this is just, you know, bizarre, but the president of the MCELA makes $0. They don't pay anybody. It's just a pass through. That's all it looks like. Is just a pass through. Now,
it's a friend company.
Yeah. And one of the things that they said this money was used for, and I found this pretty ironic, and you'll find this ironic as well. It was used to call people to, you know, text them or whatever and remind them to vote or whatever. And once they voted, then it updates the system so that the nonprofits, or once the person votes and they're in the system as voting, it updates the nonprofit so that they no longer text that person. Now, why? You're a vulnerabilities tester. What is the problem with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's another way to keep track of who's voted, who hasn't voted, who's real, who's not real in the system. It's another validation. We see this, by the way, across the system. We have huge problems with this, where the voter rolls are way out of date, and where there's people on the rolls that shouldn't have been on the rolls for years. They've been gone. They left the state. They died, whatever. And then we see rolls bulked up with people that are not likely to vote because they don't live there. They're not real, or they are real, but they, you know, maybe they're less likely to vote because they're illegal immigrants and think they're going to expose themselves if they go vote, but they manage to get on the voting rolls somehow through some automatic process somewhere. So yeah, if you can, that's why electronic poll books are a problem as well, is that they track, they know who voted when, where. And that information being so poorly controlled, we talked about that earlier, they're on the internet, God only knows who has access to that information. And that's not right in the election for people to know who voted, who has not voted. If you're a bad guy, you want to know that information so that you can manipulate the record as to who voted. And what you want is a huge pool of people that did not vote. And if you have real-time information as to who voted and who didn't, that makes a very, very easy task for a computer program. And again, you don't need people in the state to do that or in the county. That can be done, remotely by someone in the system. I know in the state of New Mexico, they get all that data. It's in an interim database. And then at one point they run a process that dumps it all into the official record. Well, all you got to do is subvert that one, tool, that one run that dumps all the information into the official record. And if you manipulate it in the process to, mark or unmark who voted to match whatever reality you've created, a false reality that you've created during the election, that's pretty easy to do. So at that point, you have all the information you need because you know who voted, who didn't vote, in which precincts, all that kind of stuff is known. What you did, maybe you added some votes in and now you've got to reflect that into the database. You can do that. If you did last minute stuffing somewhere, you had to back a van up and put in another 15,000 votes somewhere. You did that, you've got to reflect that into the database, and now you've got everything you need to do that with a computer algorithm. It doesn't take a person to do it. It's just running the appropriate computer algorithm to do it. And again, because it's on a network somewhere, on a computer somewhere that's networked, if someone has already broken into that, they can have the appropriate tool in there to make those modifications in real time to make it all look correct.
That's crazy. And I know that we went off track a little bit here, but the reason that I bring that up is because I'm sitting here talking to you because you're essentially demanding that they issue a public retraction for a lot of the things that they said in this, the slanderous and defamatory things that they said in this. And meanwhile, and this is me speaking from my own words, not yours, my own words, Brian Lupo, I'm saying that these two people need to be investigated. There needs to be investigations into how this money was allocated, where the money went, whether it was equally distributed, because I don't have any faith in Waterford Strategies and Alper Strategies, dispersing $12 million equally. So that is something I'm saying. And that is something that should never happen again. We should never have not foreign money, but outside money in quantities like this coming in and going to anything other than well, first off, it should never happen, period. But if it is going to happen, it should never go to an outside agency that isn't subject to open records requests and FOIA requests. So,
yeah, I just recently, I don't know why I stumbled across this, but apparently Dinesh D'Souza went to, was convicted because he, sent some money to a candidate through some other people so that he could go over the limit. And the limit was 10,000 or something, and he did 30,000, and he did it through some other people. And so they convicted of that, and they sent him to jail and so on. So, and we're talking about $20,000-$30,000. I forget how much it was. Hey, it was wrong. If it's wrong, that's fine. But apparently, if you do that with millions of dollars, it's not a problem. Right. There's no one held accountable if millions of dollars are being misappropriated, misused. No one's held accountable. But here we held a man accountable for $20,000.
They get to go on CNN and accuse you of crimes.
Right. And so, you mentioned one of the things I absolutely want to do is, the CNN piece with Secretary of State Benson was clearly intended to slander me, the expert witnesses, and Matt DePerno in this whole thing. And so our entire team. And so I just want to demand that CNN retract, the claim that we are criminals, that there was criminal activity Secretary Benson needs to do that as well. And I believe they need to issue a public apology for doing that, because that was inappropriate.
Do you think you would take legal action if they don't?
I won't say, but I will say this: someone needs to hold these organizations accountable. They seem to think that they can say anything they want with zero investigation. We've got in the record, Jocelyn Benson is the defendant in the case. We have a lot of information in those expert witness reports. I doubt that she's ever read them, but it's incumbent upon her to read them, to know who these expert witnesses are before she starts claiming that we are doing things that are criminal. So she needs to know what she's talking about. And so does the investigative reporter. The investigative reporter on this, who clearly didn't dig into any of this, and then comes out with these statements, someone's got to hold them accountable, and it needs to hurt enough, I believe, financially, for the organizations that are allowing this to go on, so that they will stop allowing this to go on. So, we may be talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in damages, because they need to understand that they can't be doing this to people. They can't just go out and shred people. And I know Cheryl Atkinson has written about it in her books, how there's a whole series of organizations set up who literally claim that they can destroy anybody in a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. Anybody's reputation can be destroyed in a couple weeks. Well, until someone takes action against these people and they are held accountable, and there's hundreds of millions of dollars in damages awarded, it's going to go on. It's going to continue to go on. So that at some point has to happen. There has to be a judge, a jury, someone brave enough, a court somewhere brave enough to stand up to this, and to really enable people's rights to be, First Amendment rights to be upheld, and not allow this kind of slander to occur to American citizens. It's got to be turned around, and it's only going to be turned around when there's some lawyer, there's some court, there's some judge, there's some jury that's willing to hold these people accountable, and not just creating whatever narrative they want to create and support with whatever false information they want to put out there. So I believe that's got to stop.
Perhaps we'll see, something like a Nicholas Sandmann or a Kyle Rittenhouse, take this down with their defamation cases. What you guys are seeing, like I said, is the same exact thing. CNN's feeling it, though. Chris Cuomo's gone. Don Lemon just got kicked off of primetime. Anderson Cooper's next. It's like he's got to pick up the slack from those two hacks that are now, one's unemployed and the other one's doing a 3-panel morning show. Something's got to give over at that network. But all right, let's jump in. I think this will probably be the last. This might be the last segment, I think.
We could have a real problem with actual democracy in the United States.
Election system advisor David Becker says the danger is not just if candidates win, but also if they lose and refuse to accept the results.
Imagine we have dozens of January 6ths all over the country at different places and times.
Which is why the upcoming midterms are so consequential. In Michigan, voters will choose if election deniers will lead their state, including a potential attorney general under criminal investigation.
Are you worried you'll be indicted before the election, sir?
Andrew joins us now. Is it a possibility he's going to be charged before Election Day? What's the status of the investigation?
It doesn't look like it. The special prosecutor who inherited this case has just ordered more investigative work to be done before he can make a decision on those charges.
Let's say a word about that. It's very possible that they're pulling the same stunt again, which is you create a special prosecutor. Why do you do that? Well, let's say Matt DePerno happens to get elected as the attorney general. Well, you can't just fire a special prosecutor, right? And so then for the next 4 years, they get to basically do whatever they're going to do. We saw this happen with Trump when he got in office, they had a special prosecutor, Mueller, and went on for years, right? That a special prosecutor was put in place that he couldn't get rid of. And in the end, we discovered the whole thing was a hoax, and no one's been held accountable for that hoax at all. They just did it, right? And everyone now knows it's a hoax. It was a hoax. It was documented as a hoax. That I hope they're not setting up for that right now, but it's a concern that could be what they're trying to do, is to set up that scenario where they can drag this out and turn it into something that is a problem for the next 4 years if DePerno does get elected. So the other thing I'll say about that whole clip is there at the end was again accusing you of doing what they're doing. So I believe they're doing. Democracy really is at risk right now, but the risk is not us learning what the problems are and fixing our election system. The risk is just the opposite. If we do not find out what the problems are, if we do not get a system that we trust, that is fair and free, then democracy is dead. We're done for. Our republic is done for. It will be ruled by tyrants. So it's absolutely the opposite. We must do this. And we're not election deniers. We're election integrity investigators. We believe the American people have to have free and fair elections, and that will only occur if the anomalies that are seen across the entire system are fully investigated and those issues are dealt with. And I can tell you from my investigations so far and what I've written up, we have massive problems in our system. And I believe my conclusion at this point is we probably have to replace the entire system and come up with something that is far more secure, because this thing has so many holes all over the place that I don't believe it's patchable. It's the problem of the dam and cracks all over the place, and you run around and patch them as fast as you can, but you can't keep up. That appears to be the way our election system is right now. And if anybody thinks our adversaries won't exploit vulnerabilities in our election system, they are Pollyanna, because we have adversaries with unlimited resources, unlimited people, unlimited money, and it is the big prize, because if they can subvert the election system, they can own the country. If you can pick the leaders in a country, you can make it go anywhere you want, any direction you want. And so it is a massive priority for those that hate America. And it's on the top of their list, or very near the top of their list. And so we cannot afford to have an election system that is so open to subversion of vulnerabilities. And I can just tell you, it is. As an expert in that field, it is. It's wide open. And we cannot afford that. We have got to change it. We absolutely have to change it.
Have I told you my federal and state election theory or idea?
Oh, separated? Yeah.
Yep. Separate the two.
I've actually thought about that one, Brian, because I think that would actually be good if, the three I've talked about, guiding principles to decentralize control, to decouple processes, and then to implement full transparency, except when people are actually voting. When they're filling out their ballot, that's the only time things should be secret.
Yep.
Everything else should be 100% transparent, nothing hidden anywhere along the line. And as part of this, you also minimize the use of computers. Only use them where we absolutely have to, in a very decoupled way. And so, you don't
need them for counting. You don't need them for counting or anything.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, I didn't finish. If you decouple the elections, the original thing you said, it would really help, because you could have federal at one time. It's very limited number of races that could be done very quickly, counted very quickly. You do on off times, you do state stuff. And so that's limited to just the state. Now that's more races, but still, it's relatively
you're going to have less volume, though. You're going to have lower volume, because you're not going to have the pull of the federal candidates are not going to pull in the state people. Jeff, I want to, and just so that people know, my theory is to separate the federal and the local
State.
races or state races
And the county.
and you could even
have
do
the
a
county
third
separate.
one with right. You could even do a third one with the county separate, and you have the 3 of those on separate days. And you only have 3 federal races at most. The most you could ever have is 3 federal races: president, senate, and your congressman. And you can hand count those at the precinct level in a couple hours. I mean, you're talking 400 or 500 ballots, and you got to pick 1, 2, or 3 races that you have to count. So that's simple there. Now, you're not going to have the pull of the state races, and you're also going to get better quality candidates because you're going to have more educated voters that are actually aware of what these candidates represent. You can walk down the street right now and ask just a regular person, don't ask somebody but just ask a regular person, do you know who your state representative is? And I'll bet you over 90% don't know. And that's terrifying. But I'll bet you over 90% don't know. And that's why you get people like Ed McBroom in Michigan, who is a thorough rhino, to put out a report like that without even consulting the attorney. I mean, that's just insane to put something out like that and then give ammunition and fodder to CNN and MSNBC and all these other places to say, look what the Republicans did, And so I think I can't, I need to put this down somewhere and just write out my idea on this and let somebody else do something with it that's smarter than me.
No, I absolutely agree. And that was one of the ideas that had come across my mind also. So I'm glad to hear you're espousing that as well. No, I think it has a ton of advantages. One reason voters don't show up is that lines may occur if we were to do it on election day. But if you reduce the number of races to just 3 or a handful, guess what? People vote much quicker. It's much easier to vote. The lines go much faster. So yeah, you may have multiple days that you're voting and you spread it out over time, but you get in and out much quicker. So I think in the end, it would be a much better way to go. And one of the things it would do is also keep, the outside money, make it more difficult for money outside. Right now, since they're all combined, outside money can have a huge influence over a county race. Okay. If you had a county race and all it was a county race, and you've got counties all over the place having county races at different times, it makes it much harder for outside influences to drive what happens in that county. Same thing on a state level. If you have state races all happening at a different time without federal, then anybody that's going to fund it has to fund that period of time in that state race, right? And right now they get a threefer. When they come in with outside money and start dumping it in, they can affect a federal race, a state race, and even county races all in one fell swoop. And so they're getting a threefer on their money. And it makes it easier for outside influences to influence what's going on in that state. And that's not right. It shouldn't be, $100 million coming into a state when it should be the people of those states deciding it, not $100 million coming in from outside the state that decides who gets elected in that state. That's absolutely wrong and should be shut down. And the way to do it is to separate those races out. And if you did, it would make it much harder for them to have the resources and the money needed to spread it out over that many different elections and locations.
All right, folks. So as we start to wrap up here, I want to give an opportunity to my guest, Jeff Lenberg, to kind of lay out in a shortened, condensed, this is 2.5 hours, a shortened, condensed way for you to get your message across to the individuals over at CNN that put out this absolutely atrocious hit piece on you.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. When CNN and Secretary of State Benson accused me of breaking in and criminal activity on the broadcast they did, it was exactly what I did was exactly the same thing that Benson paid Alex Halderman to do. It is documented in his filing in the Antrim court case, which, by the way, is still open and on appeal with the Michigan Supreme Court, in which Benson is the defendant. So I did, and what Halderman did was exactly the same thing, using the same techniques. So if she's accusing me of criminal activity, she just accused herself of paying someone to do criminal activity in the very same case for which she is the defendant. And she is being represented by the Dana by Dana Nessel's office, who recently appointed a special prosecutor to prosecute her opponent, for Attorney General Matt DePerno, in the election that is starting this week. I guess the prosecutor will have to investigate Secretary of State Benson and Alex Halderman, put them on the list. This is nonsense. It's nothing less than abuse of power and the public trust for political purposes. I demand that CNN and the Michigan Secretary of State Benson retract the accusation that I was shown on video performing criminal activity and apologize for attempting to ruin my reputation.
And let's make sure it's public too. All right, Jeff, I want to thank you so much, sir, for coming on. Thank you for all the hard work you're doing. I know a lot of people don't really give you guys the credit because they don't know what you guys are doing. They don't know how much money this has cost you, the time away from your family, the time on the road. They don't realize, what kind of a burden this has on people. So I want to thank you personally on behalf of me, as well as all my listeners, as well as a lot of patriots out there who know that you guys are fighting the good fight and trying to make sure that our elections are free, fair, and secure. So thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it, sir.
Thanks for that, Brian. And I just want to remind everybody of this poster here, if you want to read that one more time.
Yep. We all place ourselves in danger to a certain extent when we stand up, but we place our children and our grandchildren in even greater danger when we don't. So that's, that's a great.
We all need to stand up for what's right, for the truth, and not think someone else is going to do it.
Amen.
It's us. We have to do it.
All right, Mr. Lenberg, thanks again. I appreciate that. And for everybody else listening out there, stay frosty. God bless each and every one of you. God bless America. Make the fortune cookie country pay for this.